All right, good evening and welcome to the February 2nd Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. I ask that everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Everybody please be seated. Again, you are at the Village of Woodbury February 2nd Planning Board meeting. We'll get right, there are no minutes for this evening, so we'll get right to the first item on the agenda. First item on the agenda is a public hearing for Superb Developers. Public hearing for ARB application of the proposed changes to the exterior facade of a previously approved office building. Said property is located at 14 Corporate Drive and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Maps, Section 226, Block 1, Lot 88. This was noticed in the paper of record on Friday, January 28th of 2022. There are no consultant reports this evening. The applicant has submitted some new renderings and a new ARB packet. So if you just want to real quickly go over what you submitted to us, and then we'll go from there, sir.
Sure. Thanks, board, for the time to address this matter. We did give some new renderings, namely to make it a more subdued exterior. We also, just as a precursor, we did give some photos as per request of the board last time as to our neighbor's property on Corporate Drive, including, we note, 2 Corporate Drive, which is painted with a white exterior that was somewhat similar to our prior rendering, but nevertheless, we have offered a subdued Alaska gray multi-panel style, as well as a mix of gray and white. You have the renderings there, but I also have them also in physical copy. For example, that's one of the siding examples that you can see isn't a glimmering white. It's a more subdued, certainly more subdued than the 2 Corporate Drive white panel. We also, obviously, we've shown some of the other siding that isn't, again, some brilliant white. It's a grayish rendering. Further, some of the shingling, again, is a subdued. You know, it's blue, but it's really a bluish, subdued coloring. That was an attempt to try to address some of the inquiries of the board from last time, to try to make it less. I guess the last time it was a homeowner, if you recall, that had a shining white, reflective white, and then we followed with a less white, and this time we're trying to take it down still another shade to a light gray, which we think is less brilliant than what is already at 2 Corporate Drive, and makes it, you know, a more, we think, responsive to some of the requests and comments of the board. We've given some various materials and color copies of the sample. I think the board has. If we like, we can share those, but I think you have both the photos of the 2 Corporate Drive neighbor, as well as the roof IKO Atlantic blue, shingling, the siding, the Royal Sterling, the trim ASEC evening blue. And again, that's only on the trim, so it's a narrow area for that particular color. And then the new stone MSI Alaska gray multi-panel, which we've given, as well as we've given you the deck doors and the other materials to show the board some of the new ideas that we think was responsive. I don't know if you gentlemen have anything to add to that, but that was the goal, was to
And I think you did. I think you heard what the board said and some of the preview application as well. So we thank you for
sure
coming back with some different suggestions and options here. So with that said, does anybody from the board have questions for the applicant before I open up the public hearing? Okay, so this is a public hearing for 14 Corporate Drive. Those wishing to speak, just state your name prior to making your comments, and we will open up for public comment on 14 Corporate Drive. Public comment for 14 Corporate Drive. Last and final call on public comment for 14 Corporate Drive. I'll offer a motion to close the public hearing for 14 Corporate Drive.
Make that motion.
Second by Tommy. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so the board has the packet that has been submitted by the client. There have definitely been some changes since they last appeared before the board. Comments, feedbacks, concerns. How does everybody feel? Anybody have any feelings?
I just
Hurt
have
feelings? Go ahead, Rich.
I got one question. In the ARB application that we just got, I'm looking at the last page where it says new proposed building or rendering. The roof is significantly blue, but if I look at the shingle, it doesn't look like, is that just the?
Yeah, that's a good question, and you must have been in my office about 5 minutes before we went on, and I asked that very same question. Just have some comfort. The samples that we gave you are the samples that we're using, and the rendering is a little. I think it's nice and it would be fine, but it's a little. The real shingling is more subdued than the rendering. So the shingle that we gave and identified the samples for and are on the application will be what's used. The rendering, maybe he's a frustrated artist, but I think that it's a little bit more than the thing itself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, even when you Google like Atlantic blue shinglings, most of the things that come up, it's more of a bluish gray than it is blue. So anyway,
Right.
if it gets approved, Mr. Landing, it's going to be the building department will hold you to whatever's on the actual ARB sheet, not what the color
Absolutely. And just so you have some comfort, I think we did this before, but this is the, you can see it's a grayish, there's nothing bright blue or sky blue about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we've identified and we expect to be held to it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? I take it everybody's okay?
Yep.
All right, so then I will offer a motion to have council approve a resolution of approval, a draft resolution of approval.
Make that.
Second by Rich. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so Mr. Golden will draft that for us. It'll be on our next agenda for us to take final action. And then it will be sent to the building department. Once I sign it, you guys will be able to move forward.
Thank you so much for the board for your time and your consideration.
And thank you, sir, for working with the board and hearing the feedback and the changes.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, sir.
Bye.
All right, next item on the agenda, ML&YD Inc. This is a review document submitted for ARB and ridge preservation of a proposed single-family dwelling located on lot number 8 within the Timber Trail subdivision. Said property is located at 2 Holland Court and is known in the Village of Woodbury tax map, section 237, block 2, lot 12. I think I saw, yes, Mr. David. Good evening, sir.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back, especially after this disappointing football season with Buffalo losing. But we'll have to get past that right now. So even though that was the best game of the series,
That was the Super Bowl.
It was phenomenal. So, well, I hate to repeat the words used in the prior presentation, but we come back to you also with a more subdued version of the previous rendering that was submitted for this lot 8 on the Timber Trail subdivision. We provided 3 renderings, each one showing a non-white exterior. We're emphasizing a herringbone, a bone, and a linen exterior to around the three sides, and then in the front, we're proposing a natural cream. As you could tell, the colors are so similar in rendering, they were hard to make them distinguished from each other because of the way the rendering programs are. But in each case, I think you'll recognize the fact that we definitely subdued it, kept it within the earth tones, and I believe incorporated most, or if not all, of the comments from our previous application and submission.
All right, so here they are. This is option 1A, right? Yes. This should be option B. Okay. So this looks a little, this is darker than the first option, right, David?
Yes.
And then we have option C, which is almost the same color, but it changes around the front window, right? Makes the front window area a little bit darker in here.
A little bit, yes.
Okay. And then, okay. And then this is the application that was submitted.
Yes, correct. That is the application, and the sample board. The wood trim that we're proposing remains the same color. The fieldstone stone veneer that we show is also remaining the same.
All right, so I'm going to open it up to the board for discussion. We did ask David to come back and sharpen his slide rule and come back with a couple of new options for us. They have. How's the board in general feel about these?
Yeah, I just have one question again. I know we discussed what the board approved in 2015. In fact, I think Natalie displayed what it looked like back in 2015 on the submission.
Yes.
Yes.
And obviously, this is a lot different than what Natalie displayed. My question, again, and I think we briefly discussed it, my concern is what's going to happen to the other applications as they're going to be coming in as a single application, not as a total subdivision, meaning the owner of the specific house can choose and pick whatever color they want. And that concerns me. And knowing what the board approved in 2015, and this is I guess this is the first one of the lots that we're approving. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I'm just wondering what's going to happen to the lots that follow. And my concern is going to be the coloring, because it definitely doesn't match anywhere near what's in Timber Ridge. So
I think that's a multifold answer. So if they're going to have the ability, they still have the ability to pick from the previously approved subdivision colors, because those have already been decided prior. So you can potentially have a mix of those homes and colors and styles and this home. If this home gets approved, depending on which option, if it gets approved, other houses that come into that development are then going to start to be compared to this home. So to me, it's a little bit of a risk on the applicant side, going on a single lot by lot approval, trying to get approval on a single lot by lot, because then you're going to start comparing homes to homes. So you may potentially end up in a situation where you have a bunch of homogeneous homes, what ARB tries to avoid as well. And I think Rick did caution against this at our last meeting, if I remember correctly, about the developer taking this approach of going home by home, which is well within their right. They can do that if they want. I don't know if that's really the answer you're looking for, but I think that's kind of the situation we're in now. You're going to have the potential for this home, and then you can still have the potential for the other three styles. I believe Natalie, it was either 3 or 4 styles, I forget, that Natalie had sent us with those homes as well in the development. And I don't think there's much we would be able to do about that because that's already been previously approved. Am I completely off base, Rick?
No, that's correct.
So again,
Sorry.
go ahead, Natalie.
I was just going to
So-
ask a question. Is this approval for this house, this individual approval, does that actually extend to the other lots, Rick? Or is it the approval that was for the subdivision, though that remains for the remainder of the lots, correct? Or
Yeah, this is an ARB for this particular lot. However, it necessarily, as Chris was saying before, sets the stage for what the neighborhood is. And so subsequent homes, if a certain number, if somebody wants to choose something else afterwards, they're going to have to fit into this kind of style, or somehow argue that it's still within the character of the neighborhood.
got it?
But this was not a sub amendment to the subdivision. This is just a resolution with respect to this particular lot's ARB.
Correct. You know, and also, board members, please keep in mind that this is the physical aspects of this house is one design of 4 that were approved. So the other designs, not colors, but the other designs are different than this. In accordance with the planning board approval of 2015. So addressing the point that this might set the stage for the rest of the subdivision, you know, that's not cast in stone. The developer has to proceed at his own risk, but we're definitely looking at this one particular house at this particular time, and then to go from there.
How does
All right, so
this,
how's the board feel? What's the feedback from the board?
I had one more question.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
How does this, these options, how do they compare with the approved options for the other 7 homes?
Give me, if you,
We're looking at it now, how it fits in with the neighborhood, with the houses above and the office building down below. I'm just curious, I don't remember the renderings from the approved ones already, if they're compatible with this new style. Not
yep,
style.
hold on, let me, give me 1 second. I can grab those.
I have them also if we need them.
I do too, Chris, if you want me to share my screen.
Let's see who can get to their email faster. I got them.
I can't share. I don't have
I
access
got
to
it.
the screen.
Okay, so this is the original ARB application. These were the colors: estate gray, light mist, heather moss, Booth Bay blue, iron gray, Woodstock brown, and cobblestone, Washington, aspen, Savannah. And then let me rotate here. Come on. Does my screen not want to rotate?
The scans
Okay,
are
well,
heavy.
if everybody turns their screen sideways. I apologize. So this is, I guess, the blue option. So it was blue. It looks like it was like a blue, gray roof. So this would be the green option. The other green option.
The other one was a gray option, Chris.
Sorry, gray, green. Thanks, Rick. So gray, green, and then brown.
Could you
So-
stop right there? Could you, I'm sorry, Chris, would it be all right if you stopped right there?
Yep, this the brown house.
This is the house that, for the most part, that we're proposing these new colors for, this design house. As you can see, the 3 dimensions of it is not changed
There you go.
substantially. It's just the colors and the materials that we're asking for consideration.
So let's. It's not gonna let me do split screen. All right, so this is option A right now that's in front of us for this house. And then this is what the original subdivision approval was for.
So the other lots can go ahead if they stay within these approved option color or these colors?
Yes, they don't lose the rights to this. So this, if they went in tomorrow and they built the other 7 lots out and they picked from these approved plans that we have here, they would just be able to get their building permits and go.
Got it.
So these are just the different styles, the different options and stuff that are there. So,
There still would be some restrictions that they couldn't have, say, the same green option right next to one another. Because there are still some restrictions in the ARB law saying you can't have excessive similarity with respect to some of the buildings within the subdivision.
right, so you wouldn't have, the next 7 houses can't all come in and be the brown, gray, or blue, you know, like, couldn't have 7 brown, 7 blue, 7, they have to mix it up if they went with that.
Right.
And also wouldn't necessarily have the same architectural features like the one that we're proposing now, for example, with the wood trim around the windows or the wood panels. You know, it's not necessary that the architectural elements we're proposing on this would be repeated on the other houses, or they could be. You know, again, if that were the case, we would come back to the ARB and ask.
Yeah, they'd have to come back to the ARB if they want these particular treatments.
Well, thank you for bringing up those images. They look compatible to me.
Thank
Now,
you.
why would some of the previously approved lots, so why would they have to follow some of the ARB rules like the excessive similarity? But this one, sorry, I'm trying to get through this question, but why would they have to follow some of those rules and then not follow other rules as they pertain to the surrounding neighborhood?
It's not so much that they can pick and choose which rules. There is a rule of no excessive similarity. So they couldn't, so if the next person had a blue option and picked blue, anything within 300 feet of that under the rules couldn't be excessively similar. So they couldn't have the identical house within 300 feet. But, you know, 600 feet down there, they could have a blue. So it would just depend upon which option. That's as to that one particular aspect of the ARB law with respect to homes within 300 feet of each other. There are generally, when a subdivision is approved with these options, the whole purpose of that is that, except as to this 300-foot one, you can pick whichever one you want and you don't have to go through an ARB approval again because it's already done. Here, they didn't want to pick one of those. And so they had to come in. So somebody else is going to have the option of saying, no, I don't want one of those options. I want something else. So I'll come in and you have to individually review it.
Make sense, Evan?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right, so we got 3 options. What do we like? What do we don't like? Bueller.
I personally still think that it is. It's just it is in the right direction, but I still think it's very dissimilar. I'm trying to separate the obvious fact that the other lots could just pick from what was approved, but the fact that this is before us now, I think to me the answer that this is very dissimilar to the neighborhood is obvious. So I think it's still very dissimilar.
Tommy? Sorry, I got to go through everybody just to.
Yeah, no, it's
we move
okay.
along.
I mean, I think Evan's making a good point. You know, if you want, it's going to be very dissimilar to the rest of the area.
Yeah,
I think it probably maybe just even a little bit darker than what we have. It's a total different development than what's in the surrounding area.
Rich?
Again, I kind of agree with what Tommy and Evan said. again, what concerns me is they have really two options, the previously approved in 2015 and what's before us now. And I know they're gonna take a risk. My concern is when the second house comes in, if they want something totally different, then it's not gonna conform to the neighborhood or what was picked in 2015. So I'd like something darker too. It's not so much the design, the color is totally a lot brighter than anything else in the community or what was approved in 2015. So kind of concerns me going forward.
Thank you, sir. Mike?
Yeah, I kind of agree with all that too. If you look at it now, with just the Tyvek siding on it, before the approved siding goes on, it really stands out. And even if you tone down a little bit the white, I think especially this time of year when there's no leaves on the trees, it's still gonna be pretty bright.
All right, so what I'm gathering is, well, from what everybody's saying, and I just want to try to summarize here, is we're okay with the architectural elements. Nobody has any problems with that. I think it's the overall body color of the house. We're okay with trim. We're okay with stone, like the stone veneer around the front, the trim that's around the windows. Does anybody have any concerns with that? Because it looks like we've narrowed it down to the body of the house.
Well, personally, I would still say that I think it's, the materials and how they're being used across the plane is still a little haphazard, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay. I'm trying to give David as much direction as possible and on what this board is feeling and the direction the board wants to go. So that's why I'm trying to narrow it down to the last sticking point here. So I don't want,
I would think it's the color of the body of the house, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think I'm okay with everything else.
And then I will agree. I think it's
Yeah.
overall, it's a very nice home, a very nicely styled home. I like the use of the stone and I like the way you've incorporated the wood in that around the windows. I think that does help add to that kind of more rural section of area over there. I think it's really, David, I think it's just the body. I think that's the only issue that this board has right now. I know it's not what you want to hear, but
Well, no, I'm happy to hear that because at least, for the members, recognizing just some architectural elements here. It's unfortunate that all five aren't. I mean, just a little bit of an expression is not, so out of place, within the community. And I thank you all for allowing, or at least considering the wood trim and the stone and everything else, with it, because again, it does match the three-dimensional design that was approved prior. I just like the board to realize, some of the colors that were approved back in 2015, light mist, iron gray, aspen, Washington, Savannah, these are all light colors, especially Savannah, light mint. I mean, we could use a green or a blue siding here to comply with the previous ARB submission and approval. I mean, that was what was approved. I realized this board wasn't involved at that time, or members, but here we're proposing a light tan as opposed to a blue or green or a dark gray. I would just ask the board to just, consider that a lighter house would definitely show nicer in any, well, in my opinion, in most neighborhoods, as opposed to a dark colored house, it will stand out within that 1.5 acres or 1.25 acres sitting on grass. The contrast between the green grass and the trees and a dark blue house would be great. Here, I think we made a really nice attempt to pick a light color that would work well with the natural surrounding. Because I mean, while it's within a neighborhood, I mean, you still have grass on this lawn, you still have trees in the background, so you are dealing with the greens and the browns. Tan, what was the other color? Tan, herringbone, or linen. I mean, again, all light tans, light grays, or tint of gray. So, I mean, if that's what the board decides, of course, I'm gonna go back to the owner, we'll, re-investigate it. But I'd like to just ask the board to reconsider. I mean, this is not a bad option for the body of the house. As opposed to the colors that were previously approved.
I can definitely understand the arguments that you make, and I can see your point of view as well. Like you said, I don't think any of us were on this board in 2015 when the subdivision was originally approved.
Right.
So I can't speak to what was done or what the thought process was or how those decisions were made. I'd be honest with you, I don't think the colors that were chosen back then either would reflect the character of
The neighborhood.
the neighborhood either. But I can't go. None of us here can go back and change any of that.
I agree.
I think we're in a very interesting conundrum here, right? We have an approved subdivision with approved colors and approved designs and this, stuff, and the other thing. You happen to be the first one. You happen to be the first one into the neighborhood. Which again, I commended this. I like the design of the house. Is not, I think anybody really has too many qualms with that. It's just when you drive up Timber Ridge Road and you look to your left, right, and then you look to your right, you're gonna go, oh, it just doesn't fit within what's there. You've got that older building in the front of you, right at the beginning of your project, and then you have those. I'm guessing they were probably the 1980s or so. Those condos that were built to the left that are really dark in color. To me, Mike brought up a good point when the leaves are down and the shrubbery is gone from 32 or from that other, if you're standing across the street in Timber Trail, I think that even though it's cream, it's not white, it's still a muted color, a more muted color. I just think it's going to be like, hi, I'm here. Welcome to my, you can see our home, and it doesn't blend as well as something maybe, I don't know, a couple of shades darker probably would kind of blend in with everything that's there. I am by no means a color person. I leave those decisions to people higher above me in the food chain, but
We contact those people. I mean, these are physical samples of the colors.
See, to me, it actually looks in the sample now looks brighter than what's on the rendering, and that's what worries me.
Darker than what's on the rendering.
You have I hate to do this to you. Do you have the color, like the color selection with you?
The sample board, I can get it. I can definitely get it.
And this is the reason. I suggest
the owner went ahead and did it himself. I would have rather put a professional board together, but it is what it is.
I'm not worried about the overall sample, but the product that you're looking to use. No, most manufacturers usually have like a, color chip wheel. I don't know if this. I'm sure there's a technical name for it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the color sample board, for the stucco. There's the colors board for the the siding. I don't have the stone with me, but I definitely have the physical samples, or can get whatever remaining physical samples are needed.
I'm just because what we did last time when we kind of got into this conundrum is that the other developer took out the samples from the manufacturer of the products they were looking to use, and we kind of looked at them, and we looked at like 4 or 5 different colors from that manufacturer and said, hey, I think the board is amenable to these 4 or 5 colors. Can you speak to your client and see if they feel the same way? Instead of guessing, now we're going, you see where I'm just trying to go, David? I'm trying to get us over, I'm trying to get you over the finish line here for everybody, so that everybody's happy, so that we have a home that blends and you have a happy client. And I don't want to keep making you do this.
And I appreciate that very much, of course. Board members, what can I do to help to get this approved? We're not at the bright whites, we're at definitely the next level of tone. The next level after that's going to be darker than what I'm showing you. It's going to be more on this range. I'm just guessing right now, but we're showing you things like this here. Probably the next wheel will be the colors like that.
See, and I think personally,
get darker and
That's what
darker.
that's a big, to me, that's a big change right there.
Big difference.
All right.
I know it's probably a subtle slide in the color wheel, right? But
Yeah.
that little slide down the wheel makes a big difference.
And perhaps you
Good
could.
thing that wheel's not flat.
Yeah. Maybe you could bring the sample board into the building department and we could stop by and take a look at it.
Yeah, I'd like to put together a board that would be consistent with industry standards, so you a little bit more professional in what was provided. So, we could do that. That's not a problem.
I think right now, and you're hearing the feedback from the board. So maybe if you even put, you put a sample board together with your best foot forward and leave a link to the manufacturer, or we can look up the manufacturer. We'll look at the color samples they have in case there's some questions to it. So the board can look at it and maybe make a decision that way. Or I don't know if you can leave samples of 2 or 3 of the body color of the house, like in that, say to your homeowner, here, listen, this is the feedback I got from the board. If you go in this color range, here are 3 or 4 colors in this range. I think you'll be able to get yourself over the finish line and get the project finished. Does that make any sense of what I'm trying to say?
Of course, we will. We'd like to move ahead with this. It's unfortunate that seems like it won't happen right at this moment, but we could put together a few more samples. At this point, if the board is agreeable, perhaps we can dispense with the renderings, which do take a lot of time, and just provide the samples and on a sample board, and you can look at it at that time. Not that it's impossible, but as some of the renderings take a while because they have to generate and you have to pick the sunlight and the shade and all that good stuff. So would a sample board be sufficient for everybody?
From my perspective, yes. As we saw from the last application, the rendering didn't match the sample.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
Yep, so am I.
I agree.
You know what? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's great.
And again, David, I am sorry. Nobody here is trying to be difficult. We're trying to manage the needs of your client with the needs of the overall community, and of course, with our zoning regulations. So, a couple balls in the air that we're all trying to make work.
Sure. I understand. Absolutely.
All right. Anything else, David?
Go LA Rams for the Super Bowl. They have the team, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you,
evening.
sir, for your time this evening.
Everyone healthy, and look forward to hopefully seeing you next month.
All right. Take care, sir. Have a good night.
Good night.
Next item on the agenda, Gardens at Haddam Station, discuss status of application review for the proposed transit-oriented development. Said property is located on State Route 17 in the village of Woodbury and is known as the Village of Woodbury. Tax map sections 243, block 1, lots 1 through 25. Good evening.
Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well.
All right, I hope you're doing well this evening yourself, sir.
My name is Anthony Mirando. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Gardens at Harriman. Joining me tonight is Barry Price in the lower left screen, if you have the same panel as me. Barry is here on behalf of the Gardens. And of course, as you know very well, Steve Esposito over on the right side.
All right. So why don't you go ahead? I know there was a request that was put in that, and we asked that before that request be considered, that you come to the board, kind of give us an update of where you are, where you're going, look you where to go. You do have almost a completely new board except for Mr. Cottagio. I think he's the only one that was here the last time this application was presented. So I think it was a good point to get everybody up to speed on where we are and what we're looking to do. So I'll turn the virtual podium over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I really do want to say thank you so much for putting us on an agenda. I know you have busy agendas, and we appreciate the fact that you're allowing us to come in and talk and update you on this, what we think is a pretty important project for the village and the area. I actually wasn't here when the project was presented to you last time either. So fortunately, we have Steve and some others who were. So that's a good plus for us. As you probably know, the Gardens is a pending application. It's a transit-oriented development project that has been positioned to meet the intent and the purpose of the existing Transit Village zoning district. It's located on the east side of Route, Route 17. It's primarily in Woodbury, with the northern portion of it in the village of Harriman. It straddles the Harriman train station, which of course is why the basis for it being a TOD. We have some things to talk about as far as next steps and some suggestions we have to help move the process forward and help with collaboration and on a project of this size and scale and importance. But before we do, we thought it'd be really helpful if Steve walked through a brief presentation on the history, some of the background to the chairman's point, to update everybody, kind of put us all on a level playing field in terms of status of the project. And then we can talk about any things the board wants to go over or any ideas we have for how to go forward.
Sounds good to me. Steve, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Am I up?
Yep, you're showing, sir.
Okay. Let me just. Good evening, Steve Esposito, and Chris, if you mind, what I'd like to do is just give a little history of the site, because it really has quite a bit of history with regards to the planning board and the village, and then go into our plan and what we've been doing for the past few years.
Yep, go right ahead.
So, okay, so the site is what we refer to as Site A of the Interstate Commerce Center. It was a project that was introduced in the mid to late 80s that had three sites, or three parcels. This is being Site A of the three parcels. The other two actually have been built out over the past 25 years, but this site was never developed. The ICC project, the original project, prepared a full environmental impact statement, and findings were filed on that document in 1987. The ICC received site or subdivision approval in 1989, and
it's fine.
can somebody mute themselves?
My name is Manu.
Who's that?
You guys hear that?
Now we're fine.
Okay. So they received subdivision approval in 1989. It has 23 individual lots. And if you look at the tax map today, you'll see all these lots that exist. The project Site A was approved for 1.4 million square feet of industrial and commercial, and just under 53,000 square feet of retail. Also, as part of that process, they were issued 9 federal and state permits, including wetlands disturbance permits, water taking permits, and a speedies permit for a on-site wastewater treatment plant for the discharge of 200,000 gallons a day. All of those permits and approvals have lapsed. So back in 2004, 2005, Woodbury Development LLC came along and were contract purchasers for the site. But it was obvious that the plan that was approved in '89 could really never be built again, given the current wetlands requirements, stormwater requirements, and changes in the zoning. So we came back with a plan that was consistent with the zoning at the time and the regulations at the time, and prepared a supplemental environmental impact statement for that action. As part of that supplemental environmental impact statement, we had to look at alternatives. And one of the alternatives that we came up with was a TOD, or transit-oriented development, because it's one of the only sites that has its own train station. And in doing so, that really got the attention of a lot of people, and particularly the village or the town at the time, the county planning department. At the time, the county and towns of Blooming Grove, Woodbury, Monroe, Harriman, and Carrish-Joel were in the process of preparing a report. It was called the Southeast Traffic and Land Use Report, sort of dovetailed simultaneously with our efforts on the Site A. And after some coordination and cooperation amongst the stakeholders, the county got a grant to hire a regional plan association to come in and do what's called the Harriman Transit supported case study. And the case study really, and that had, again, it had a lot of stakeholders involved in that: the county planning department, our RPA, the village or town of Woodbury at the time, the village of Harriman, Monroe, and everybody rolled their sleeves up and came up with a lot of community input and charrettes to come up with that plan, the case study. And the case study was really sort of paved the way for the village to amend their comprehensive plan and also update their zoning, because at the same time the town was transitioning into the village of Woodbury. So they were also obligated to update their comp plan and zoning. So in 2011, the village of Woodbury now adopted the 2011 comp plan in zoning. Once that zoning was adopted, that decision was challenged, and unfortunately, the challengers, the courts found in their favor, and threw that zoning out. Of course, the village appealed that, and were successful to overturn that decision. But it took several years to do that. In the interim, in the 2013, 2014, that's when the state of New York was doing the gaming, had the gaming frenzy going on for casinos. Caesars International was interested in this site. They picked this site for their proposed casino. Again, we prepared a supplemental environmental impact statement and submitted it in December of 2016. And shortly thereafter, the governor decided not to give Caesars or anyone in Orange County a gaming license. They went elsewhere in the state. So Caesars pulled up and left town. But right at that same time, the judge had overturned the appeal. The village was successful with the appeal, and along came the gardens. And in 2016, we presented the conceptual plan, which is the first step that's required in the TVZ zoning district, that has to get reviewed, and there has to be concurrence, where this concept plan has to be deemed consistent with the case study and the 2011 comp plan. And I believe it was in December of 2016, the planning board made that decision. And so we went forward with the secret process. We got POSDEC'd. We went into scoping sessions. We had public scoping sessions. This draft scope was prepared by by the applicant and reviewed by the village consultants, and all the interested agencies had an opportunity to comment on it. The original scoping document was adopted in 2017 and then slightly amended in 2018. So in our concept plan, one of the things that we were required to do is to do what's called a constraints analysis. So we had the wetlands, which you can see, and I'll go over all some of the specifics of the plan in a minute. But we had to deduct from our gross acreage, which the total site is 130 acres. There's 12.3 acres, 112.3 acres in the village of Woodbury. And then to the north is 12.6 acres in the village of Harriman. And then a small portion of 5.1 acres is in the town of Monroe. That is not part of this application. The only two portions of the site are the Woodbury and Harriman portions. So based on that constraints analysis, that gave us the net buildable acreage. And in the TVZD, we have two densities that are permitted within the core of this plan. And again, just to get everybody oriented, here's Grove Street. This is the bridge over the old railroad bridge. This is 17, right along the southern or westerly part of the site. This is the existing or the original parking lot for MTA. This was the expansion of the parking lot. And then the platform is right in here. And what the core is that's the high mixed use area of this zone. It's closest proximity to the zone, to the train station. So in that area, you were entitled to, well, the maximum density is 25 units per acre. Outside of the core line, and this is a half a mile from the platform, the maximum density is 10 units per acre. The 12 acres that are in Harriman are also zoned PUD or PAD actually, and a PUD, planned unit development, is also permitted in that zone, which is very, very similar to the transit-oriented zoning of the village of Woodbury, which is great because it's going to be a seamless sort of thing. It's not going to look like two different municipalities. They work together. The goals of that, that zone are very similar to the goals and objectives of the TVZ zone, which is flexibility, sustainability, walkability, and then with the idea of and open space. So in the TVZD, we're required to have at minimum 40% of the entire site is open space. The 20% of all of the proposed units have to be affordable, and 50% of the units have to be 2 bedrooms or less. So so as part of this plan, in the case study, some of the design criteria that are set out in part 3 of that document is the idea of a north-south road, which is this road right here, that connects the two pieces, because when they looked at it, they said this is really the south part, north part, and with the middle being the wetlands, and that's this green area here. We have state and federal wetlands. The darker green hashed area is the wetlands themselves, and then the lighter line outside of that, that's the 100-foot adjacent area that comes with the state regulated wetlands. The case study also talks about access points, and we have to have a minimum of 3 access points onto the state highway. And what the plan proposes is to use the existing MTA access point that would be upgraded to a signalized intersection. This is the second access point, which is really selected primarily because of site distances. There's some vertical and horizontal curves along 17M, so this is really the best spot for that location. And then we have a spot to the north, you know, in this, that's going to actually access the portion of the site that's in Harriman and connect to the interior of the Woodbury portion of the site. So those are some things that are in that case study that we have to incorporate into this plan. The other aspect of the case study and comp plan and the zoning is sewer and water. This type of development has to have central water and has to have central sewer. So as part of the ICC project, this is what we call this. These circles right here are wells. The wellhead protections. So the outer circle is a 200-foot radius for control. The inner circle is a 100-foot radius for ownership. And then the little dot in the middle, that's the wellhead. So this is OR1. Since then, we've drilled 2 rock wells, well 2, well 3, and then a gravel well, well 4. The well locations have been coordinated and have input from the Orange County Health Department and the water folks at the DEC, because they're the ones that regulate this aspect of the project. The DEC will issue the water withdrawal permit, and the state and local health departments will review and approve the water filtration component to the waste domestic water, and the Orange County Health Department will review and approve the domestic distribution system. We also have a utility lot, which is right here, that will have this is where we're proposing our wastewater treatment facility that will be on site. It's required. This site is not in Orange County Sewer District 1 or the movement. So we're going to have provide our own facilities for treatment, which will also include a discharge. In doing so, we've met with the DEC. We've had a pre-submission conference with them to go over, you know, the utilities that under their jurisdiction, the wetlands which are under their jurisdiction. We've also had pre-application meetings with the DOT, because there are, you know, given we've got the 3 access points, we actually had a 4th that they said no way. So these will also be upgraded and these will all be signalized intersections. There'll be some road improvements, some shoulder improvements, turning lanes, etc. So we wanted to get their input early on in the conceptual design of you know, the on-site and off-site roadway improvements. We've also been dealing with Orange and Rockland in Central Hudson. Orange and Rockland is the purveyor of electricity. They've got a transmission line that runs right along skirts right along our eastern side of the site and runs along the rail bed. Oh, by the way, this is the old abandoned rail bed that has been, I'll say west of 17, has been purchased by the county, and that's really the Heritage Trail. And we've also, Central Hudson has a transmission line that runs right through here and then hangs a left and goes back up along the utility easement of Orange and Rockland. So we've been dealing with them in terms of getting power and gas to the site. There's going to have to be some on-site improvements, you know, that we'll deal with and coordinate with them that they'll have to do. We've also been in contact with MTA from the very, very beginning. Matter of fact, we've been in contact with MTA from 2004. And, you know, because we're coordinating this access point with their driveway, we're in a position to obtain an easement from them once we complete seeker, but they can't make any decisions, just as a municipality can't make any decisions until seeker is concluded. But we've been having those ongoing talks with them. And they've also been, you know, they were also an interested agency throughout the entire process. Just going back to, so these areas in here are what we are the core areas and the mixed use high density areas. The constraints analysis and the conceptual plan that was presented to the planning board, the maximum number of dwelling units that will be permitted in the core was 1,060 units. The maximum number of units outside the core based on the net buildable acreage is 100 or 351 units. Within the area, within the village of Harriman, the maximum number of units was 120 units. So it's roughly 1,500 units plus or minus for the total project. The concept plan, when presented, had the mixed commercial use, again in the core area, was approximately 100 or 245,000 square feet. Since then, the only real change, there's two changes I'll say in this plan from the concept plan, was that once we started doing our preliminary engineering, which includes grading, stormwater, management facilities, wellhead protection, wetlands, that number has gotten reduced. We're in the neighborhood of about 150,000 square feet of commercial, mixed commercial in the core. And then the other minor change to the plan was there was a connection of a roadway that came through here, which had a pretty significant wetlands impact. The DEC weighed in on that, and they were very reluctant in that particular aspect of the plan. They thought that there was more than enough opportunity for vehicular access based from the north-south road. So we made a decision to eliminate that connection as well, because we don't think we're going to get it permitted. Let's see. I did mention that the minimum, or this plan has to have a minimum of 40% open space, which we exceed. And then, in addition to the wells, once we drilled the well, we ran 24-hour pump tests to get an idea of what tentatively what the yields would be for those wells. We also thought extremely important to us is water quality, and these have all been tested and retested. We did initial tests during this Caesars analysis, and we've retested water quality for these wells, for the gardens. And once we commence our 72-hour test for the wells, we'll resample again. But the good news is the water quality is super, and we're very glad about that. One of the things that's holding up our moving into the 72-hour test phase of the waters is OR1. The well is substandard, so we have to renovate that well before we can do anything. So and unfortunately, the well is in the adjacent area. So we have to get a permit from the DEC, and we've applied for that permit to go in and renovate the well, and then we can set up for the 72-hour test. Let's see what else. So how we sort of set this up and why these are almost the idea is to have like neighborhoods, small blocks, village sort of scale, tight, streetscapes, landscaping, amenities. And, so these are really like what we see is like blocks of, development. Ultimately, the architecture will be, the end user, which will obviously be subject to some further review by the planning board. But what we're doing right now is engineering the roadways, the utilities, and getting to where the site, to a point where we can finalize our evaluations of the potential impacts. We've done quite a bit of work. just like to run through some of the technical, and these studies are really consistent with the scoping outline. We've completed our energy use and greenhouse gas impacts. Phase one, well, we've done all the archaeology analysis. We actually had SHPO to sign off on everything. We've done our endangered species, wetland delineation reports, air quality analysis, sound and noise reviews. We're sort of stuck right now with our physical and economic impacts because we still have to flush out some components of the project, to conclude that. We've done our traffic impact study, but likely will require an updating given the current market. And we've done the engineer's report for the wastewater collection system, engineer's report for this public water supply and distribution system, phase one environmental assessment, and phase two environmental assessment. The phase one was just updated again for need for the owners. We've completed our market analysis, which will likely be updated again. We're in the middle of our hydrogeological assessment, where our geotech report is complete. And we continue to work with the DEC and regulators on the infrastructure. With regards to Harriman, like I said, it's great that their zoning is very similar to the Village of Woodbury zoning. When we started this project, we have two applications, one pending in Harriman, one pending in Woodbury. In the beginning, both boards jointly worked together during the scoping session in developing the scoping outline that was eventually adopted. They've had input from the very beginning, so they're part of the stakeholders and have been in the whole process. I think I'll just leave it at that and see if you have any questions.
Well, Steve, that was
A little history.
to say do we have questions as a group, I'm sure is an understatement. There'll be a lot of back and forth, I imagine, with a project like this. I think at this point, if I can kind of circle back to where we started, if that's okay with the chairman, what we're here for in the short term was to give you that sort of complete update, but also to move forward by asking permission to work with some of the village staff and consultants to iron out some of the complexities of these things from a technical and engineering standpoint, from nuanced and discrete zoning issues to the mechanisms in which infrastructure will be held, things like that, so that we can take our reports and start putting together the materials for the EIS in a more complete way at this stage. That's what our goal is, to go forward and continue to work closely with this board to get it to the next stage.
Okay. Makes sense. Does the board have questions for Steve or for Anthony right now?
I don't
I know
have
it's a lot.
question,
It's
but
a lot
I
to
have a comment.
digest in a short period of time.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. When presenting this, you have to include a discussion of the Nepera plant and the aquifers and how so far there hasn't been any cross-contamination, but we have to be assured that, the aquifers don't interact and that.
Michael, if I could just respond to that. We have been working with Nepera. They've been from Caesars when we started to do they have test wells. They've allowed us access to them. So they have some test wells, in close proximity to the rail bed, which is to the north and to the east of us. So when we do any pump testing, we will monitor those wells along with any other wells in the area to see that in fact there is no hydrological connection. The good news is we're they're down gradient from us. So we've established that. That's been established, quite some time ago. And that's why we've been testing, we've been super diligent in testing the water. And that's also why we've completed the phase 1 site assessment and phase 2 site assessment, which is really a hands-on, sampling report. So we're as concerned or more concerned about Napera than most. So they are definitely on our radar. And like I said, they've been really cooperative working with us. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. The only reason I brought it up is because there is a public image that Cambridge really messed things up and that it left a mess for somebody else to clean up. So if you want this to be successful, you have to counter that image from the beginning.
Appreciate that.
Any other feedback from the board right now? Go ahead, Rich.
I've been on the board for over 10 years, and I do remember when this came to the planning board, and I believe the applicant mentioned there were other TODs or transit-oriented developments that were built east of the Hudson that were very successful. And if we had pursued it going back years, we would get more information, possibly a site visit, because this is a pretty big project. And I'd like to see what is a TOD? What does it look like in real life east of the Hudson? So he did mention there were 1 or 2 other ones built next to the train station. So it'd be interesting if they could be identified. And then the second thing, which would be very interested to see, is for those other sites that are completed, what was proposed in the original plan and what was the final as built and what was the final traffic and economic impact after it was built. I believe the applicant at that time said he could identify those other TODs east of the Hudson. It would be helpful because this is, pretty complex.
Steve, do you know of any other TODs that have been built?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we can do. Matter of fact, we have there's an Orange County developer that was instrumental in developing one in Connecticut. We can give you a list of that, and we'll include. I believe that there's a requirement for us to include some of that case study in the EIS.
Great.
Sorry, go ahead, Rich.
No, that's great. Great.
Steve, I'm curious, given the current economic environment, the change in working conditions, just the way that the world has changed in the last few years, will the report that you have to issue in your EIS take into account the new world that we live in?
Yeah, so that's why we did a market study. The absorption was great. The demand was there. Once we get to a point, we're going to redo that, and we're close to starting that. We're kind of waiting a little while to see if things level out a little bit before we do that. But yeah, we'll have a new market study, and that will analyze today's or tomorrow's trends.
Okay. Tommy?
No, not right now. I'm good for the time being.
Evan?
Is it a little premature to ask about essentially, well, obviously on the north side of the site, I think you're saying these are more townhouses, multi-story townhouses and things like that, but on the southern, I guess, southwest side of the site, or the mixed use, are those, what are those? Are those like podiums, or what kind of buildings are these kind of thought up as?
Well, right. So, the vision is that, there, and it's in the code, that the majority of those buildings will be what's mixed use. Because the idea is this is like, if you notice how wide this street is right in here, this is really like Main Street. and we want on-street parking, and it's going to be streetscapes, and, you know, the first floor is going to be commercial of some sort, and then the upper stories are going to be residential. So that's really happening like right in here.
Mhm.
And then as we move out, we'll reduce the number of commercial reduce the square footage of commercial, and they'll go to like more residential buildings, but still in close proximity to the downtown and the train station.
Got it.
Sorry, I'm looking at
I guess
there
one.
is,
Oh, go ahead.
there is a map from 2017. From, I guess, that's actually from you, Steve.
Yeah.
That the layout seems to be a bit different than what you're showing us today. Looks like some of the road networks is different, and so I know you're saying there's some minor changes, but I'm trying to see from what you have today to what was originally presented to the board, what is really being constituted as a minor change.
Well, what you look at right now is, you know, this is, you know, we've had input from the Harriman design consultants. We've had input from the village's design consultants. And, you know, with regards to road geometries, road widths, right of ways, and getting utilities in there, both sewer, water, gas, electric, and, you know, so these roadways and you know, are now have been engineers for the most part, and grading has, you know, been done, and, you know, it's, so the concept is still the same with the neighborhoods and the small, you know, the small blocks, but, you know, things had to get shuffled around so they fit, and they were designed accordingly.
But Rick, when does the when is there enough change to consider the concept plan that we're working off of is no longer the concept plan?
Well, it's not so much that you have to be wedded to the concept plan, absolutely. As with any project, things go through changes. When they come out during their DEIS, and they're going to have a plan at that point in time, and you're going to compare it with the concept plan, you're going to compare it with the code and the comprehensive plan, and you're going to determine whether or not that's acceptable under your zoning. You're also going to have to, as you do with anything, determine whether or not it's acceptable from your point of view with respect to site plan elements. So you still have all the control over this project with respect to its design. So I wouldn't worry too much about how they've changed until they come back with their final changes as proposed in the DEIS. And then it's going to be picked apart and analyzed by all the board members and all of your consultants.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. So right now, if I understand that the ask is you want to work on some of the technical aspects with the engineer, with our consultants before you move forward and work that stuff out, correct?
That's correct.
Now, how long do you think is a reasonable time frame that's going to take? Because I'd like to, I just don't want to, I'm a little concerned about saying, yeah, go ahead, go work with the consultants and do what you want, and we don't hear from you for another 2 years.
Well, what we could do, Mr. Chairman, because it's hard to predict exactly the time it will take to resolve some of those issues. But I think what we could do is promise to come back on a routine, in a somewhat of a routine basis, to give you an update and show you what we're working on, or be able to at least summarize that.
I think I like that. I think maybe quarterly would probably be a good idea. Would you think? How does the board feel about that? Having the applicant come back once a quarter, just to give us
Give us
an
an update.
20-minute summary of where we are, where you guys are today, from where we were and where we're going, just so we know the progress the project is making.
What's the
I'm
alternative?
okay with quarterly.
What's wrong, Evan? What's up, Evan?
I just said, what would the alternative be?
That we wait till they put a submission in and we don't hear from them for another 3 years, and now they put a, submission in that is War and Peace, and we're going through the whole thing. This is just to make
Yeah.
sure that the project is staying on track and that, everybody's still working together. And I really just want to make sure the project is staying on track, and not too much is done behind the Iron Curtain.
And Chris, we would absolutely, like to do that as well. We have some, things we'd like to flesh out without having to produce War and Peace every time we want to come in and talk to you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I think, Evan, on a project this size, it may be beneficial to everybody to get it in little smaller pieces than getting the entire Encyclopedia Britannica in one sitting.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we don't want to, oh, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, we don't want to surprise you with anything. We'd rather be speaking to you, the deciders, about it as a group when it's appropriate and when we have the right information to give you. So we welcome that opportunity, and we appreciate you being willing to give us the time.
And it probably does not need to be stated, but I'm known for stating things that need not be stated. But the consultants, when we are going to be speaking with the applicant and their consultants, are not going to be making any substantive decisions with respect to this project. We'll try to clarify some technical things, maybe some legal issues with respect to some things, but anything that's going to be substantive with respect to this project, we're not going to be running this as sort of adjunct planning board members. We're here in a very much more defined and limited role. All of us consultants for the planning board know that the true decision makers, as Anthony just said, is this planning board.
Well stated, Rick.
I was just gonna say, I've worked on projects of this size, and do you think that quarterly is few and too far between? Is it too irregular? Would it make sense to have something that's slightly more regular or often?
I think as we
Can I
get
make-
closer, as some of the details get worked out, I think as a starting point, I think we say quarterly, but I think a lot of it depends, in my view, how much data comes back, how much progress they make. Because at some point they're going to have to come back for regularly appearing planning board meetings anyway. There's going to be public hearings that have to be done. The scoping document has to be gone over. ARB has to be done. All that other normal jazz will still need to be done by this board. What I'm just trying to make sure is that the project just continues to move forward overall, and that we're abreast of everything that's going on behind the scenes. And maybe there are questions that come up with the consultants that this board will need to answer, and this will give us a good checkpoint to help answer those questions. And then, a year from now, when they say, listen, we're completely ready, we're going to give you a submission, and then there'll be regular submissions, regular meetings, and all that other stuff that we normally do here. I just want to I want to try, because this is a big project for anybody to get their head around, especially for a group of volunteers. So I think this is a good way for the planning board itself just to be abreast, instead of, I've got 2 file folders sitting behind me of stuff that I had to try to read through and catch up on to figure out what was going on here.
I don't mind me making a comment. We agree. We don't want to get out ahead of you. We want to do things and then have you review what we're doing, so we don't come back with something that you're not going to like. So it's a great idea for us to meet periodically and let you know what we're doing, so we're sure we're going in the right direction. We got a lot of work to do.
Mike, are you okay with that too? Okay, good. So right now, this board, Rick, I don't think we need an official vote on this. So right now, just this board is just saying it's going to be okay for you guys to go back, work on the technical and zoning and legal issues that you may need to flush out. with our consultants under the purview that the decision, most of the decisions will still have to be made by this board going forward. And that we will want to have a check-in or January, March. How's like June-ish? You think that's too soon or too late?
No, Steve, I mean, I think that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, I think, Chris, I think, the quarterly as a minimum, but I think we're gonna, as the consultants work together, we're gonna identify things that we need to come back to you and get your approval, input, whatever it is. So it could be quarterly, it could be monthly. I mean, it depends on how much we get done and how quickly we can, identify these issues. And, that will need to be weighed in by the board.
Okay.
But June, I
So
think,
how
is a good target.
How about for now, we tentatively say June, that will put us into the next quarter. Gives
Okay.
you a couple months to get the ball rolling.
Yep.
Steve or Anthony, if you find a need to come back sooner, just, follow the regular process and we'll get you on the agenda as we can. But figure we'll get you on we'll set a date for the June meeting, get you guys on just for at least an update of where we're at and what kind of progress you made. I think everybody's amenable to that.
Yes, sir.
That'd be great.
That's wonderful.
Phil, anything? I see you joined us tonight, Phil. I know there's no reports or anything from you, but if there's anything you want to add this evening?
Yeah, I think the only thing we would want to make sure is be involved in any discussions with DOT. As Steve had indicated, they've made progress on certain items. So, there's going to be a lot to digest, once we get the studies. But I think any discussions or progress with DOT would be important for us to be aware of. Hey, Steve, whatever happened with with Norfolk Southern, by the way? Has there been any update on that?
On the rail bed?
Yep.
On the abandoned one?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's really nothing. We've, it's, we had a desire to, reach out and see if we could do, paths or connect to the rail trail, the Heritage Trail.
Right.
We're still working on it, but legally it's a little tricky, and
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
That's fine. That's fine.
But Phil, like as other projects, but Carlito or I schedule something with the DOT, we'll absolutely let you know so you can attend as well.
Great.
So.
Natalie, same. I want to offer you the same chance. I know it's a big project, not looking for anything worldly here, but if anything you want to bring up now.
No, I don't think I have anything at this time. The applicants have my number, so I'll wait to hear from them and, work with them as needed.
Rick, anything to weigh in on?
No, nothing further.
Okay. All right. So Steve or Anthony, anything else other than you guys got your blessing to move forward with these consultants, and that we'll see you back in June for a status update?
No, nothing further. We really do appreciate you taking the time and hearing us tonight. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good evening.
Okay, have a good evening.
All right, so last but certainly not least, Evan had wanted to have a discussion on some of the sections of our zoning code and our zoning code. Some ideas he had for helping improve those sections of our zoning code, and I will turn the virtual podium over to you, sir.
Sure. Now I feel like I'm before another planning board. It's weird. So the one thing was the non-conforming uses, section 310-42.2B3. Right now, it says essentially, well, let me give some backstory. So the intent, what I think is kind of troublesome right now, is that right now it has text in it that says, if you have an existing non-conforming use, you essentially can, if you can essentially keep it or make it a lesser restrictive non-conforming use. So for example, a 3-family non-conforming use building in a otherwise single-family zoning district that is being repaired or damaged, and now they go down to a 2-family non-conforming dwelling. Right now, that's a possibility. We kind of experienced that in the zoning board of appeals. So I'm proposing that we strike part of the code that says that you can keep it to a lesser conforming use. And it says essentially, if changed to more restrictive non-conforming use, shall not be changed back to a less conforming use.
Interesting. Rick, what do you think?
There's an old comedic routine that I won't try to give from Lenny Bruce, but the essential part of it is that you have laws to try to solve problems, and I don't know what problem this is trying to solve.
Well, essentially, I think that what we've seen some things happening was that you have like that example, right? You have something that's already non-conforming, and essentially the theory is that a non-conforming building over time and many years will essentially disappear, and the current zoning district will prevail. But there are opportunities now where you can go from a non-conforming use to a slightly less restrictive non-conforming use, which would also be, I think, just kind of furthers that, goes against that idea where the non-conforming use eventually disappears over time.
Well, I mean, clearly, if that's the way you want to go, there's no problem in doing that. And I know that the Board of Trustees is considering several changes to the code, and I think one of them might actually be the non-conforming part. But and you'll get obviously input into that because it gets referred to the planning board before any zoning laws are passed. But as you said, the whole theory behind allowing non-conforming uses is, one, you can't just outlaw them, right? Because people have property rights in something that was proper when it was approved, so you can't just take those away. But the thought is, as you said, that over time, that the goal is to eliminate all non-conforming uses and make everything conforming. That, of course, never happens, but that's the theoretical goal in zoning with respect to non-conformities. And then what this provision is supposed to do is help in the transition to that. So for somebody who has a 3-family, if there's no transition to maybe go down to a 2-family, they would have to go down to a 1-family. They may hold on to that 3-family and do whatever they can and try to sell it as a 3-family to keep that nonconformity because it's of more value. So to allow that transition of something less nonconforming is along the line of trying to eliminate all the nonconformings.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
to me, I see it as a sort of a proper stage, if you will, to go ahead and transition to then hopefully then it'll eventually just be, in this example, single family. Because once they have a 2-family, they can never go back to a 3-family. So the only way they could do it then is a non-conforming. If they're going to change it, is to change to less than a 2-family. So to me, it makes sense. It's very typical among zoning laws in other municipalities because it's consistent with that general theory that has been repeated by the courts many times with respect to zoning. But if you think that somehow it gives the wrong incentive, that would be the reason to consider a change.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I understand what you're saying, and it's a good point that it's kind of an intermediate step to the ultimate understanding that non-conforming might, fall back into the fabric of the proposed zoning. But I do see it as kind of an opportunity where you can essentially just prolong that period and take advantage of that. I'm curious to hear what other people might think and everyone else.
So the way it's written now, if I to understand it, because we actually haven't had much, I don't think we've actually had any of this come in front of this board per se. I think it's been in front of the ZBA. So if I had a property that had a warehouse on it and it was non-conforming now by new code, and then I wanted to put a restaurant on it, I could potentially do that because it'd be a less non-conforming use. Or is that I think I'm using a really bad example.
But the trouble with coming up with examples is that it may implicate other areas of all of these non-conforming use provisions, and they sort of have to be read together. So, when an example comes up or an application comes up, you sort of have to look at all of these provisions rather than just that one provision.
Well, does anybody else that you know of, and you do this, and if you do this anywhere else, where once for whatever reason they lose the nonconformity, they have to go to a conforming use? There's no step down transition between the two?
I can't think of one offhand. There may be, Chris. The whole issue of non-conforming uses and non-conforming buildings and structures does not come up routinely, but it does come up from time to time. But I don't recall right now off the top of my head of any municipality that doesn't allow you to go ahead and still be non-conforming, but less non-conforming. That's sort of the whole purpose, is to try to get people to have less non-conformity. Because if you're stuck with either a non-conformity or conforming, most property owners will hold on to that non-conformity like grim death. They won't want to lose it because that may be valuable.
There's one municipality that I worked with, and one of their moves to kind of push away from the nonconformities quicker was that they had a lot of issues with these homes having safety violations and fire issues that arose from their nonconformity, and when they went to a slightly lesser nonconformity, those issues kind of just continued and caused the issues. But obviously, that's a kind of a hypothetical.
Yeah, and I don't know how that would really come into play, because you would think that if there were building code issues that made it unsafe, that's a whole separate course of review that would go on. If in fact there is building code issues when they go down from a 3 to a 2, it doesn't give them extra protection. But I guess you could try to figure out some way, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but figure out some way in which you have, if you're going to go to a less restrictive use, it has to somehow conform to all, you get a new review, for instance, of all building code issues.
Yeah, one code. So I'll give you exactly what they use as their code. So they struck that kind of lesser restrictive non-conforming use, and they put in afterwards, they said such dwelling has no occupancy violation or fire safety violation on date on which such damage or destruction occurred. So that's what they added.
Could you read that again?
Yeah, it said essentially such dwelling has no occupancy violation or fire safety violation on date on which such damage or destruction occurred. So they were having issues with occupancy violations and fire safety.
So they were saying basically, they were interpreting the non-conforming that they could continue safety code violations that were in existence prior to the destruction?
When they were repairing, some of them when they were repairing and going to lesser non-conforming uses, they essentially had these open violations that no one was aware of. That kind of got them in that place in the first place.
But when they rebuild, they're still going to need a building permit, right?
Yep.
And why wouldn't the building inspector be able to enforce the code with respect to that rebuilding? I don't think that they would be restricted by a non-conforming use or building rather.
Yeah.
At the last zoning board meeting, Chris, you distributed the minutes for this. You were at that meeting. Wasn't there a similar discussion?
With conforming, non-conforming?
Right.
Yeah, there was, and I know Kelly, who is Rick's counterpart, was going to look into that section of our code and maybe make some suggestions, because I think there was some ambiguity in the code between what with the conforming, non-conforming.
And it wasn't just the building, it was also the lot.
Yeah.
Kelly did say that that issue had arose at the ZBA, but I didn't talk about it with her in any detail.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't remember all the details around that particular one. My brain can barely keep all this going on straight sometimes. I don't know.
But I'm certainly not sort of trying to defend the current language as immutable. So, we're always open to helping the village try to solve a problem. I just want to make sure we're working to solve a problem. And then try to come up with the best language in order to do that.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, right? There's that balance where you are trying to enforce the current zoning, but at the same time, you're obviously obligated to let whoever's land and property it is continue their use without subjugating them to anything more complicated and detrimental to them. So I just think that it seems like there are just kind of opportunities to use the zoning right now to do other things that you might want, or otherwise get other uses that might not be permitted in certain zones.
Well, there's different policies at play, whether you're dealing with non-conforming buildings or non-conforming uses or non-conforming lots. You really have, it's a whole separate dynamic really of each of those. But if you've seen problems, that's usually the best guide to say, all right, here's a problem that's been tested against this language and the language has failed. And so let's try to modify that so that we can rectify it.
Oh,
Evan, I think it would be advantageous if you, like Rick is saying, if you could give us concrete examples of where a problem has arisen so that we can recognize, understand a little bit better. Because right now we're dealing mostly in hypotheticals.
Yeah, so one issue that I had when I was on the ZBA, I don't remember all the details at this point, but essentially what was happening was over the years, you would have, let's say use this example again, this three family dwelling. And over the years, you had many different applications come in, and these projects something would happen, they get damaged or a fire or something, and they were able to go down to a lesser non-conforming use of a 2-family within an otherwise single-family district. And there were many and when that came to the ZBA, we essentially were set by the precedent of the past, because no one really addressed that fact that there was no one addressed the fact that you can go down to a non-conforming use. I have to get the details, so apologies if it's not really clear, but I have to do some research on that.
So Evan, do you think maybe it'd be good, and maybe Rick, you'd be okay with this, if you got a little bit more of your details? I vaguely know what you're talking about. I don't have all the details in my head. Maybe you and Rick could just set up a little time and talk about where you're trying to go with it.
Yeah.
Come up with and then maybe either Rick or you, Evan, could come back to us next time and say, listen, we talked about it, and after speaking to Rick, maybe we're just gonna leave it as it is, or these are the changes that Rick and I think we should come up with, and then we'll kick it around there. Because I know Rick needs, just from working with Rick for a couple of years, that Rick needs, once you give Rick a couple of examples and how it was applied and what you think the intent should be, Rick is pretty good at coming up with solutions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to talk in hypotheticals either. I think it's a good point. So I'll dig those up and then I'll talk to you, Rick.
Sounds good.
Anything else, Evan?
And there was just one more item. I'm sorry, guys, which was for the Architectural Review Board. I had some proposed additional text. I think ours is a bit, it's just a bit light. So I had some, should I just share my screen? Let me see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on 1 second. I'm working off of 2 separate computers right now, which is probably not a great idea.
Well, good news is you have dress pants on.
I told you. Wasn't kidding about that. 1 second, please bear with me. But essentially, it came from, obviously I'm an architect, so we are always at the mercy of other people's architectural codes and things like that. And ours is essentially pretty light. Obviously, it talks about excessive similarity, dissimilarity, and things like that. But I had some proposed points to add. Let me just grab that 1 second. All right, let me share my screen.
Pulls out. You haven't heard anything else, Rick, about virtual meetings coming to an end, have you?
No, not at all. And what's going to happen is that it will come to an end when the state of emergency comes to an end. And so nobody knows when she's going to go ahead and end the state of emergency, but that's what the open meetings law modification is tied to, is her state of emergency, unless they pass another new piece of legislation.
Okay.
All
Go
right.
ahead. Yep, we see it.
All right, so essentially the intent is to expand and add additional sections to section 8.5 about approval, conditional approval, disapproval. Right now it says no change to alterations of building. And I think right now we've seen a lot of interesting different architecture out there, and essentially with the development that's happening now and everything, I think it's a good time and a good opportunity to revisit this area. I know it's already changed recently, but I propose adding some of these elements. So architectural character, you might say an architectural character should prevail. There should be some repetition of basic elements through harmony of colors and common scale. However, each individual structure should have an identity, and the result should be an aesthetic unity as a whole. And then I go into some other subsections of that. So for example, for site, this should fit the site. The project should be designed to respect site character and constraints and minimize changes to natural conditions rather than altering a site to accommodate a stock building plan. A project scale should be harmonious and proportional to the site and neighborhood. Attention should be given to the transition between the street and the project through definition of building entry, walkways, landscaping. 2, coordination of site elements and building. Design and placement of fences, retaining walls, gates, arbors, and other site features should relate to the building, architecture, and site topography. And then for the building itself, the building elements, proportion, continuity, harmony, simplicity, rhythm, and balance should prevail in building design and massing while being in proportion to one another. Architectural interest, well articulated but not cluttered building elevations are encouraged. Large roof and wall elements unrelieved by shadow or textural interest are generally not acceptable. Elevation details should not overwhelm the senses and appear awkward, gaudy, chaotic, and/or mixing architectural styles. And then the last part is about neighbor. The black is essentially our current code I was just adding, this one I'm not entirely sure, but I think we've encountered it a few times where people would show neighboring sites that are, 500 feet away or the next block over or something like that. So I've seen in other codes where they define an actual, distance from the structure, like I think you said 300, and adding intersecting street. And lastly, the last exception that, just from an architectural point of view, 32 is the corridor through the entire town and village. So I think that maybe in that area for properties abutting it, there should be some sort of incentive to encouraging more interesting architecture as opposed to something that is just kind of, typical. So I know these are all very, aesthetics are obviously hard to enforce and subjective, but I think some language might be appropriate.
Interesting. I like D on number 1 about 32.
Yeah, I like the 32 on myself.
I do know the ARB law was recently redone to allow this board, the language was changed to allow this board to have a little bit more leeway over applications. So I don't know if adding additional language may do away with some of that leeway that was trying to be worked into the code. But I'm not a lawyer. I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express.
Well, I will tell you that I think all of these principles that Evan is bringing up are very good. Our code, as he points out, is really just similarity, dissimilarity. And you have, you can fit a lot into that box, but there's still a lot that's outside of that box. I represent the planning board in the Tuxedo Park, and also in the past also represented their separate Board of Architectural Review. And they've gone to an extreme with respect to the types of architectural restrictions there are on buildings, even to the extent it's very difficult to get at any new style whatsoever. You'd always have to stay with old styles, which is not a very good architectural principle generally, because I guess we'd all have grass huts if that was instituted in the very early days. So, but I think the things that you really want are the types of things that Evan is talking about here, which is you don't want discordant architectural elements being thrown in together. And you don't want some of these other site design principles that would, that are sort of, depending upon your eyes, I guess, somewhat shocking to your eyes that it doesn't fit. And I think some of that came up in the context of one of the applications tonight. It's some of those elements seemed a little bit odd, at least to me, of being put together. But I think this is a good start to go ahead and broaden your ARB limitation basically on similarity, dissimilarity, to also take into the specific architecture in general ways, not getting too specific as to what size the mullion should be or something like that.
Okay, I get on board with that.
Yeah, and I would also add that it's like, it's obvious that we don't have a dedicated ARB. So, you could, like Rick said, there are places that have pattern books and everything that go into, hundreds of pages of details of what you can and cannot have for every single building, every single part of the building. But so there's that balance between the fact the planning board's acting as the ARB and then having dedicated ARB with all these rules. So.
I mean, I'm okay with sending it over to the Board of Trustees to have them consider changes. Now, it would come back to us anyway, right, Rick? Just by virtue of.
I think it probably makes sense, even though it'll eventually come back to you. I think it probably makes sense for this to be put together and for it to be discussed by the planning board generally to make sure you're bought into all of these, or you may have some other suggestions to it. Actually, there's a lot to be said about, and Evan covered it briefly, but saying in Tuxedo Park, it's actually a mainstay of trying to design things to the natural terrain and not have you have any kind of excessive grading whatsoever. And you can require building designs to do that. You have that ability. So it may be good for this board to talk about it some more and then present to the Board of Trustees sort of these proposed changes, have the Board of Trustees shake it about and analyze it and then send it back to you for final. And then that could be done. I think it makes
Okay,
a lot
so
of
then
sense.
it sounds like, I think next step would be have Evan distribute this to the full board and then put it on our next, put it on an agenda after the full board has had a chance to read it over, think about it, and then have a interactive discussion with the rest of the board and then go from there.
Yeah, and then refer it over to the Board of Trustees.
Okay. All right. I think that's a plan. Good with that, Evan?
Yep, that makes sense.
All right. Anything else, sir?
That's it.
Anything else from the rest of the board tonight?
Any update on the moratorium?
Extended another 6 months, and there have been some hardship extensions that have been worked into the new AR. That's not new, but the re-extended moratorium.
So they are allowing some hardships.
There are some
Well-
hardships, but again, that is all within the wheelhouse of the village board. So the applicants have to apply for them. The village board has to take certain criteria into consideration, whether they're going to grant or deny them. And then once that is done, Kelly will tell Rick, and then Rick will let us know if it applies to one of our applications, and then we can move forward from there. So just for the day-to-day for us, it doesn't really affect how we do business right now until we hear about an exemption or the moratorium is ended.
Yeah, you won't get something before you that was subject to the moratorium, except if it received a specific hardship exemption from the Board of Trustees. So you don't have to worry. If it's before you, it means that it's been approved for a hardship exemption if it was otherwise subject to it.
Yeah,
I think we have a couple, we have a handful of applications that we took we took as far as we could, but we couldn't vote on them because they were subject to the moratorium. So potentially those applications, right, could apply for a hardship and then come back to look for their final approval. Correct, Rick?
That's correct. Both some residential as well as commercial.
Right. So, but for us right now, it really doesn't affect our day-to-day until the applicants go and apply to the village board and whether or not they
Get
get
the
the
hardship.
hardship.
Correct.
and just for information, the criteria for hardship was centered around water supply. If they get water from Village of Curious Joel or from Village of Harriman, not affecting Woodbury, then that's one consideration. Or if they have an appropriate well.
Right, but again, that has to be approved by the village board. They have to submit documentation supporting those claims. Our engineering firm will need to back up those documentations. Legal will review to make sure the documents are in order. Public, I think there's a 45-day decision notice, and then a public hearing, and then the village board has any time to act after that. So even if someone puts a hardship in tomorrow, we probably won't hear for at least a month or two.
Right, I was only just trying to explain what the criteria were.
Yeah, it's on the website, Tommy. The local law with the exceptions are there. If you have a little hard time sleeping tonight, that legalese always gets me. But no, I just want everybody on the board you keep everybody's expectations the same, that whether or not there's exceptions or that it can be exceptions, that this board will just continue what it's doing. We'll take the applications as far as we can, and Rick will advise us whether or not we can take final action. Regardless,
it's hard to actually sort of generalize as to what the hardships, the criteria would be as to any specific project. It's rather general language with respect to the hardships, intentionally so, in order so that there can be some flexibility. by the Board of Trustees. But also it's very much dependent upon the specific circumstances of that application. And so that's why I hazard to sort of give some general guidance as to what can or can't be receiving a hardship.
So you said it better than I did. I was trying to get at that. Really, we'll wait till we hear from Rick.
It's not up to us.
Not up to us. We wait.
It ain't up to us.
We wait till either Rick or Kelly tells us we can take action on an application, and then we'll go
And
from there.
then we move forward.
We'll just keep doing what we're doing.
If they get the Cupid doll, they can come in. That's when you know that they've gotten the approval from the board.
Anything else, guys and girls?
That's it.
All right. I'll offer a motion to close unless anybody wants to stay. Rich, I'm sorry. Any questions?
No.
Questions? All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.